Hello, everyone. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, or maybe good fiesta or siesta, depending where you are on the globe. The usual suspects here, myself, Peter, and my boss and colleague, Andy Willand, or maybe Hello. Colleague and boss. I need to think how to present you, Andy, next time. Are here to talk about an automation strategy that delivers. What's the agenda today? Perhaps you already noticed that it would be a kind of a different session. This time, more or less, it would be a discussion, right, between Andy and I, and hopefully you from the questions panel. So don't just expect some monologues by our side. For that, of course, the white motif, the main theme of this webinar will be the 5 failures that you cannot afford, not in your life, but in your testing life, in your automation, in your time to market strategy, or in your software development lifecycle. Right, and some special featurings here from our developer advocates team, which were so nice to prepare totally unscripted challenges for me and Andy, which we had to quickly address in this webinar, and we're going to show them and you how to address these challenges. From time to time, you're gonna see 2 poll questions during the session, and by the end, you will see we will have a Q&A session. For that, all the demos, the screen sharings will be ad hoc between Andy and I. A few more videos are coming here. As I said, stay with us till the very, very, very end of the presentation. It would be worth and fun, I really promise that. So, who are these greatest Camille's here participating with the so-called challenges for us? Alyssa, Sam, Ed, and Catherine. Maybe you already know some of them if you're following them on Twitter or our Twitch channel, which is called Coded Live. They are your guys, no matter if it is web or desktop, Angular, React, Blazor, Vue, or .NET. They create really cool content constantly, so I encourage you to follow them. And of course, they tried to challenge us. Today, we accepted the challenge boldly. So this is the main topic of the webinar, the 5 failures that you cannot afford, again, in your testing and strive for automation. And perhaps you're familiar with most of them, which you see on the screen. But here, I would like to, again, give the words to Andy, because Andy, I imagine that I remember that some time ago you started working on this theme and the so-called 5 failures you cannot afford. So what about them? Are they 5? Are they 50? Are they endless challenges that come every day with us?
Well, there's definitely more than 5, but these are the top 5 I think that we get to hear about quite a bit from customers and clients that are coming to us, you know, and I guess they're not in any particular order, but I would say the one that I hear the most is number 1. You know, embarrassment when a critical bug gets out into production, and you've got potentially customers that may walk away, or internal users that are frustrated, and you know, problems can come from either side, whether it's a public or internal facing app or external facing app.
Yeah, and also about tooling, this is something very interesting. Guys, we allocate some slides and minutes. And by the way, Andy and I had a bet that we are going to cover all of this content for less than 50 minutes today, since we are since this is the time that we have for the webinar. So let's see if we manage to accomplish that and who is going to win the bet. But I wanted to mention about tooling here. So this is a webinar about automation strategy that delivers. This is not a webinar exactly and exclusively for Test Studio, not even a webinar for a testing tool here, because something very important is that no matter what kind of tool you have, this is just a thing that helps you. This is not the universal solution for all of your problems. buying and investing in an automating testing tool is not going to solve all of your problems with the blink of an eye, right? This is just one piece of the puzzle, one of the most important building blocks that will make sure that you have the right strategy to accomplish and to overcome those failures that you cannot afford. So it's going to be an interesting discussion, and same is valid for Agile. Let's see how many of us and you guys are Agile or fragile or trying to be Agile, and how testing and automation help you do that. Right, and this is our first questions for you. I'm really interested if you have ever faced a bunch of those failures, 1 or 2, or maybe all of them, 5 out of 5. The jackpot is here. What would you say? But no matter what you answer, you shouldn't panic, right? And if you don't trust me, you can trust this guy on the slide. I bet you that there's going to be a solution for each of those pains and problems for it. Let's check, and I guess we can play our first poll question now, giving you a minute or so to provide valuable feedback. And you should be able to see the poll question off on your screens. Which failures are you dealing with? Choose all that apply. And you can select more than one, of course. Interesting votes I see here. It's a tough race now, 50-50, bugs getting into production and investing in the wrong tools. Exactly. Tooling, what we tried to discuss at the beginning. Still, bugs getting into production is taking the lead. But now constantly updating tests is also getting some popular answers here.
That looks like a clear winner with the bugs getting into production there.
Absolutely. Now we're going to share the poll results with all of you guys for a second. And after that, closing the poll and be able to continue the webinar.
So Peter, on constantly updating tests, I mean, there's some reasons you need to update tests, and there's some reasons that you hopefully shouldn't have to, right? If your tests are robust enough, maybe they don't have to be updated as often, right?
Yeah, this is the idea, to create the test once, hopefully, ideally actually, not hopefully, and make sure that you just click the button and leave the full automation live. It's not always the case, but this is everything that we're trying to achieve when doing automation eventually, right? The less you have to maintain, the better.
Yep, and the faster you can go, and the closer you can get to that CI/CD end of the rainbow that everybody wants to achieve.
No matter what we discuss, we can discuss like with hours, but time to market is the one that drives us all in software development, right? And but don't get me wrong, it's like a quality time to market. We can release daily and we can release hourly if you wish, but if it makes no sense, and if it is not stable enough or full of bugs, you know, we'll lose all of our customers. So it doesn't matter that you have a quick time to market. So I would say that quality time to market is all that matters, and we're trying to achieve that. Working at the QA department, which is quite fun, as they promised. Right. Okay, guys, time for our first challenge. I was scared at first when seeing this screenshot and this slide, but later on, let's see what's going to happen and if we are going to manage to answer this challenge. I'm going to play it right now, and thank you, Catherine, for that.
Hey folks, so here's my challenge. I don't know a lot about testing other than I'm pretty sure that I should be doing it, and I'm not. So what can Test Studio do for me, and how can I get started using it as someone that's more or less completely new to the world of automated testing?
Thanks again, Catherine, for that. And Andy, what would you say? One of the most important and questions of them all.
how to start, right? Where to begin? I think really having everybody on board is important. You know, both of a development and a QA team, you know, mashup, if you will, collaboration. You know, and this page kind of shows some of the things that we hear about quite a bit. You know, we see that, of course, there's a lot of testing out there that's done manually. That's less technical, but it's hard to go faster at testing manually. You have to hire more people to do that, right? And then if the dev's testing and they own it, it's like basically they're keeping up with a secondary product that goes along with the application, right? So it's often becomes more technical debt and more work to get to a stable environment. And most companies, I would say, are duplicating those efforts. There's both of these things involved. So I think getting started, having everybody on the same page that yes, we're going to do this, we are going to add automation, and we can't avoid it any longer. We can't get away with putting out poor quality because you pay for that in the end in a bad way. So, you know, eliminating the duplicated efforts, creating the collaboration with the right tooling, I think is the key. And I think for Catherine's challenge, TestGeo really provides that ability for even the manual testers, the non-technical users, to jump in and start by capturing a scenario, by recording a test, and then enhancing that test with some abilities like verifications and some things we'll show you today. So getting started doesn't have to be as hard, but I think the biggest challenge is making sure everybody's on board, that everybody's invested and ready to be a part of making that automation a reality.
Yeah, absolutely. Before you even start, before you even think of a tool, you need to clearly decide who owns testing. Are you going to constantly hire more and more and more non-technical people like manual QAs? Because believe me, guys, I'm talking from a real experience here. No matter how many non-technical or less technical staff you hire, scaling is very different. Scaling is very difficult, and sooner or later, on one of the regression stages, you might gloriously fail for that. And on the other side, if you decide totally on the dev side, yeah, these are great guys. These are going to create a bunch of amazing unit tests for you. Maybe some very good UI coded tests. But more and more you scale this, the more and more technical debt you will generate, and sooner or later this will turn into a legacy code, and good luck with maintaining and updating legacy code. Again, I'm talking from perspective. That's why all of us are trying to find the best approach here, the golden medium or something like that. And definitely how you can achieve this with a tool like Test Studio is something that we are going to show you throughout this webinar. But the final choice is yours. All right, good. Let's see what's coming next. Oh, here's one of my favorite slides. Before you start coding, there is a bunch of steps that you need to climb. This beautiful staircase. Actually, these are not only 4. I may say that these are 5 or so. Now here we're talking from the context of Test Studio, of course, because even if you have clear roles and decide who is going to own testing, still the dilemma, if you're going to full coded or codeless or low coding solution, is there. So before you actually start coding, you can rewind a bunch of other steps, right? Visual recording, which is so-called point and click recorder, where you mimic the exact behavior of your customers as if they are using your application. Excuse me. So you record your test with this point and click recorder, and then you schedule and execute it as if the end users are going to do that. And you want that there are no bugs slipping for those end users. Right. Some of the most powerful features that Test Studio adds to that is predefined scenarios with our step builder that allows you to very quickly insert such point and click recording scenarios, like reusing steps reusing subtests, the so-called test steps, playing with the browser, handling different dialogues, incorporating condition if-else's, you know, good luck in trying to create an if-else or loops via code. You know how tricky this could be. You can do this literally with a click of a few buttons with our point-and-click recorder and step builders. And then you can go even higher and have position-based automation. No matter whether you are in the lowest part or highest part of the screen, or if your screen agent has different sizes depending on whether you're using it on a mobile application, tablet, washing machine, whatever, we are there to make sure that you click on the exact spot of your screen and record your test. And even afterwards, if you cannot achieve the desired test, it's still not time to code. Coding is done here with C# and VB.NET, but before that, something kind of unique for Test Studio is the so-called hybrid approach, where we identify the elements on the screen not only by their attributes, like IDs and tags and whatnot, but also by their images. And you can choose which is the main attribute here, or mix them, making sure that you have a robust test that does not fail. And last but not least, even if this doesn't help, then you can unleash your full coding skills and create a coded test. Usually when doing demonstrations and demos and calls with the customers, they ask, are you a coded or a low code or codeless solution? What I can tell you afterwards, and you can share your thoughts with that, but what I can tell you is that we're here to suggest for you point-and-click recording in most of the time, so you can very easily get started. But don't forget that you have the full capability from scratch to create coded steps, actually utilizing any .NET namespace here. But I would say it's something like 90% point-and-click recording and 10 or 15% coded tests as an auxiliary option here.
Yeah, I would agree with that for sure. I mean, I think a big benefit here is, you know, and you'll see it when you see the tests, right? We have a codeless format that, you know, most of those tests can stay in for the length of that test, for the life of that test. And I always like to tell people, like, how, you know, what's your oldest test? How old is your oldest test? If you're constantly rebuilding them, they're not very old. They're not very reliable, right? I like to have tests that have been around for multiple years that don't break just because of small changes to the application. So that's a big benefit of Test Studio, is really eliminating the need to burden the development team with more code, because the tests can stay in a codeless format. And then if you need the code, not only, like Peter said, not only can you code it from scratch, you can also convert something that's codeless into code and extend it from that point. So we don't just generate more code for you. We try to generate a test that can stay codeless for the life of that test and live a long life as well. And that really is a pillar of Test Studio, to build up reliability, and as Peter also mentioned, the reusing a test inside of another test, or reusing steps as well. And just had a look over at the question panel real quick. Wanted to answer one that came up. There's a question about if Test Studio is in DevCraft Ultimate license. If you are familiar with the DevCraft Ultimate bundle, we do have Test Studio Dev Edition, which is a Visual Studio plugin, and that allows you to create these tests and maintain these tests within the Visual Studio project. Also, both our standalone environment and our Visual Studio environment, of course, are connecting up to source control, like Azure, like GitHub, TFS as well. And that way you can keep everybody on the same page. You can make sure that everyone has access to all of the tests, all of the up-to-date tests as well. One of the extension to the question, is there a difference between the Visual Studio Edition and the standalone? It's not something we're going to mainly focus on today. The differences, the majority of the test creation and maintenance can be done in either. I will tell you, if you're doing load testing, then you're going to use the standalone environment. Our API testing is in a standalone environment as well. However, those can be incorporated into the web tests that might be run and executed inside of Visual Studio. So there's only a few things that are not in the Visual Studio environment, and of course you can easily code. I should mention as well, in the standalone we have a built-in IDE, so it's not a requirement to have a Visual Studio license. And again, for those non-technical users out there, you don't have to have a license for Visual Studio. Even if you do code, we have our own built-in IDE to do the coding inside of Test Studio standalone. So really gives everybody a seat at the table, if you will, to create and to maintain tests. So as you go through those questions and thoughts that we showed earlier about who owns testing, it typically can be a hybrid between the developers and the testers. Sometimes started from the testing side and maintained that way, sometimes started from the developer side, maintained that way. But you're going to find new opportunities to collaborate on both from both sides of the story there. As you can see here, a couple quotes from customers of ours. An 80% decrease in time needed for regression testing. We hear this a lot. I've heard of literally tests that take days and hours to complete a complete test scenario. Even in like testing sprints, which may be weeks of testing. Obviously, when you've got bigger releases, it all takes time. And with automation, you can really decrease the time that it takes to go through that execution and repeat that execution and run your regression test list and run your new features and your smoke test list and things like that. And we do provide, as Peter mentioned, the test running as a real user in the browser. We additionally have now as well tests that you can run headlessly, and this is very popular for our pipeline customers who are automating in Azure DevOps or something of that nature. One of the pipelines, one of the many options out there, and running headlessly increases this testing execution even more, about 3 times faster. So if you can imagine, first going to automation and second going to headless automation, then you can really fly pretty fast there. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. Let me get it up here and jump into, let's see which monitor we want to share here. There we go. So here we have a quick look at Test Studio. And to kind of show some of those getting started questions that Catherine had posed, you have the ability to capture and record tests, capturing things, as you can see, this kind of codeless format that the test lives in. And of course, as we mentioned with Kendo, you can see when Test Studio recognizes a particular Telerik control. Now, of course, we do work with any third-party or custom controls. We can really automate anything on the web. But when it comes to our own, you have some added advantages, some added bonuses. And this is a bit of a sneak preview because this verification here is actually an answer to an upcoming challenge. So a little sneak peek for you.
I see that you have everything settled down already. Did we reach the other challenges, or how?
No, if you could bring it up, I will be happy to answer the challenge.
Yep, sure. So since we are heading a bit of ahead of time, let's see if we can play the next intern challenge, which would be more or less surprise for us, and give it a sec to start it.
Hey folks, so this old man has seen a few things in his life. While all the cool kids are doing Blazor and SPA web applications, guess what runs your enterprise workflow? WPF apps and RESTful APIs. And that's what you need to test with the tool that knows your UI the best, and that's Telerik Test Studio. So I challenge Andy and Peter to show you what is real, automating testing of desktop applications. Remember folks, there is no time to fail. So go watch the latest Bond movie, but test your apps first, okay? Yeah, bye.
how are we doing, Andy, by the way, on the WPF site when doing those tests? I know the webinar today is mainly for Kendo UI and more for the web, but we do also have some desktop testings, right?
Yes, that's correct. We do. In fact, we do support WPF testing, and we do even support the latest .NET 6 version of WPF testing. So for a lot of folks that are currently looking at automation or at modernization of their desktop apps moving to WPF, we have a great ability to test against those WPF applications.
Yeah. So do you think you can show just a sneak peek of automating a WPF in the meantime while we are working with the team to get the challenges going on?
Sure. There we go. It should be showing up. Can you see my screen now?
Yep.
Perfect. So just like I was just showing you a minute ago, an Angular test or test against an Angular application, which we'll come back to later. This is a WPF Desktop Test, which rather than browsing and navigating to a URL, opens up your executable file for your WPF application. And we even have the ability to detect and access those WPF applications when you're configuring your test. So one little configuration just to point it at the application executable, and you're off and running. So I'll execute this one. This is, by the way, I got permission from this customer to share this. This is a really cool app that helps in connecting valves together and pumps and putting those schematics together to control those. And here you could see it going through, and it's going to actually add a device. One thing that's brilliant about this too is there's some drag and drop capabilities in there as well. Oh, looks like we have a failure here. We could show you some failure details and some images that go along with that. I may need to run my reset on that app real quick. So let's see if we need to do a reset. Because the brilliant part here is that you can actually do some very easy, very targeted and codeless drag and drop capabilities. So now that I have that reset, we're going to re-execute this desktop application. So you can see it launch the application window. And at the bottom right, we see the debugger showing me step-by-step what's happening here. There we go. So this is now opening up and going into full screen mode to show where these pumps and valves go. Very complicated UI and a very difficult UI to test. But Test Studio has the ability here, and of course here, working with a dynamic grid. And not only is this a dynamic grid where we can go target a particular row and item, but I can actually drag and drop, and no hands, not touching anything here, right? Very precise drag and drop process. And as you can see, another drag and drop to connect in that new pump or valve into the controller there. So a very, very powerful test, great example of a lot of the capabilities the Test Studio has when creating a test. And when you look at my test, there's no code in this test. You can see that the action steps here are the lightning bolts, and these checkmark steps here are the verifications. And every one of these, when we talk about the test being maintainable in a codeless way, we have all of these tools here. The step builder, we have the properties panel, we can bring these out, and we can see all the properties of the test step. We can modify some of these properties directly in the test step as well as modify a lot of the behaviors of that test step in the properties here. So this means that these tests can stay codeless. And again, with the precision of being able to drag and drop, this is a drag and drop step from element to element. So you really have the ability to go wherever element A is, and not based on position, but based on the properties of the element, and drag and drop to wherever element B is. And so those things can move around. So I had a question earlier from a customer of ours that said, hey, are you going to be showing more than just Kendo today? Here you go, Fred. There's some WPF testing for you, and thanks to Moog for letting me show off the pumps and valves automation there.
Yep, very good presentations. As I said, we're not going to talk exclusively about Test Studio, but why not brag if we can? Of course, no matter if it is desktop or web, any web interface out there, we would be able to automate it. And not only that, we can drill down further into the API layer, like the RESTful APIs and stuff, plus load and performance testing, which, by the way, reminds me, let me share my screen now of something that I also prepared, switching back quickly, context now, and continuing with the demos here. So I have created a very simple MVC app, which you should be able to see here on my screen. It's very simple, as I said, fed by a SQL database with 2 columns, 2 rows, and a bunch of options here to do some CRUD actions. And remember, guys, when we're talking about coded or codeless or low-code approach and where you are in those 4 or 5 steps, honestly, one of the most asked questions when I personally have conversations with customers or demos is, okay, how are we sure that we can verify that what comes from our database is correct? And Andy mentioned at the very beginning of the webinar that verifications are a must here, and you will see more and more verifications during the videos now and the tests. But what I want to show you is actually how you can compare the data from the database itself that comes here from this really simple UI. Sorry for that, I didn't have a lot of time to prepare it. So this is my database and how it would look here in the fields. It has 2 values: test pass and test fail at the moment. And the test that I created was, give me a second, data-driven SQL, this guy here. So the test that I created is without a single line of code. So what we are going to do now is navigate to the application right here, then extract with the help of Test Studio the content of the first cell here, first row, first column, right, and display it on the screen with the so-called annotations, which you can enable from our step builder. Right, and you'll see on your screen. Then we're going to do the same, displaying the value from the database. Actually, we're going to read the database. After this is done by data binding the tests with Test Studio. Of course, you can hook the 2 to any kind of database. Here you can see whether it's SQL, Oracle, whatever, or just Excel, or CSV, or XML files. Data bind the test. At the moment, of course, it's bound. Already create a variable that you can reuse, and this variable comes directly from the database. Display the value on the screen, and then do another verification, comparing the 2 values, comparing the value from the database with the value that appears on the screen. And we are going to do this for the first row, and then we're going to do this for the second row. Right, where potentially there should be a mismatch, because here the value is not called test pass, but it is called test fail. And remember, we extracted this value here and comparing it, right? So I'm going to execute the test now with annotations switched on, meaning that you can see what's happening on the screen in a slower speed. And let's see what will happen. Again, this is a no-code approach at all. So we'll navigate to the application. Here are the annotations. We're extracting test pass. Then we are comparing it with the database that says test paths. And then we're doing the verification that they coincide. And then we do the same with the second row, extract test paths from the first, extract the database that says test fail, comparing it. And as you can see, the first iteration of the test passed, while the second iteration for the second row has failed. Here, right? Okay. So again, a very good example of how you can create kind of a complex scenarios without a single line of code. Of course, if you wish, you can write, read, and update databases and unleash all of your Excel powers. I have a bunch of .NET programming powers. Sorry, I have a bunch of tests which I have prepared, but this is not the main topic of the conversation now. Maybe we can cover them in another webinar that we will show you how to manage your databases with Test Studio.
Awesome.
Okay. Yeah, Andy, we're running a little bit ahead of time, and I guess we still have a bunch of challenges to cover. I'm pretty sure you have prepared something else for the grids. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I do have grids ready for you, yes.
Yeah, there you go, sir.
I like my grids shaken, not stirred.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I could switch over to my side and show you that. All right. So some of our challenge videos are having problems, but I can give you the context. And one of those challenges that came from Alyssa was, how do we identify elements? So we'll show you a little bit of that.
Happy fall, everyone. Alyssa Nykel here from the Angular Kendo UI side of life. I have a challenge for Andy and Peter. I would love to see how Test Studio can find and locate elements and show their properties.
And probably more importantly, not only how do we identify elements, but Kendo Angular elements, right? And how Test Studio handles that. In addition, I believe Ed chimed in on that as well, asking about, well, really, there's a lot of challenges in here. One of the challenges actually that Sam had pointed out was, how do I know that my data is loaded in my grid prior, so my test doesn't fail? Or actually, I think that was Ed. I apologize. I think it was Ed. Ed said, how do I know data is loaded in my grid before it goes on to the test, and so the test doesn't fail?
So I have a data grid that has a long running process before it shows data. Is there something that Test Studio can do so that my test doesn't fail before the data comes back and populates the grid?
And so I've added this in. I'll show you how and where this comes from as well. But this is a Kendo Angular grid. In fact, there's going to be two different grids in this test. The first one is a performance grid that loads, I think it was defaulted to 100,000 records. And I strategically chose this particular grid because it has a loading function, right? It needs a little bit of time to load. It doesn't take long at all, but it does have a little bit of load time. And I've added this refresh browser in there simply to make sure that you see that load time and how Test Studio handles it. These are things that are coming from our Step Builder Common menu. You saw in my WPF test, I had a maximize kind of window. We have maximize, minimize, things like that to modify, kind of the browser actions in some cases. And we also, in this case, have a refresh browser that I'm using to make sure I see that reload and can see that reload of the data in the grid there. I'm also using a scroll to center of window, just a lot of really cool test step types in here to make sure that my test performs exactly the way I want to and does everything we need. As Peter and I continue to mention, having verifications in your test are important. So I certainly will usually end my test with a verification, usually to make sure I've either succeeded at a certain workflow that I'm automating or that a predetermined condition is met you know, that things add up, that things are working correctly. So having assertions, verification steps in your test are key. And I'm actually going to use a function called run to here. It's in our right-click menu. This is also something I do on old tests that I haven't worked with in a while. I might not know whether it's going to succeed or fail. So I'll choose run to here on the last step. Hopefully it gets there. If it doesn't, the great thing about run to here is it will stop at the point of failure and allow you to start attacking and troubleshooting that failure and working your way through the test. So we'll do run to here. Oops, before I do, I will also use my annotations. Now, something you may realize between Peter's screen and mine is these are two different looking test studios, right? We're actually both showing off the different themes. I have the dark theme going today. He has the light theme going today. So you do have that flexibility to choose your theme. But I'm turning on my annotations. Again, we'll do the right click, run to here, and you'll notice run from here and run selected steps is grayed out. Once I'm in the live record mode, it will be available. So I'll be able to use those as well if I need to. All right, so first grid that we're going to is the performance grid, and make sure it goes onto the right monitor here. So I'll have it scroll to that grid, which is further down the page here. And then we'll see the refresh. Here you see that load time, right? So the question was, how do I make sure my data is loaded so that my test has the right pasting so it doesn't fail? And very quickly, we're going into a reactive forms test as well for the next part of this, where we're gonna answer Alyssa's challenge as to how we identify elements. Now, this is using a really powerful find logic that I'm gonna take you through here in a minute. Basically looking for Chef Anton's gumbo mix in the grid. It doesn't matter what position that row is in. And that's the beauty of Test Studio, is you're not just limited to testing the first rows of your grid. You can page, you can sort, filter, you can do all of the things. You can exercise the grid as the grid is intended. And ours are very, very powerful and have all those capabilities, right? So you can do all those things that you're intending to do in the grid. And it looks like I'm done. I'm in record mode. My record toolbar is up here. We see that it did go in and edit that particular item. And if I just go ahead and turn on this tool here from the toolbar, this is our element highlighter. And this, as you can see, when I pause on an element, will show us the extrapolation of the layers of this control. Here's an input that lives inside a Kendo Angular Grid data cell. So again, we have these translators that are built into Test Studio that know how to identify and work with our controls. So really making our testing tool the best thing out there to work with our controls. It's a great world, right? It's almost like we planned it that way. You know, so you have some really great features. And again, don't be discouraged if you're not using our grids yet. I'm sure you will soon, right? But if you're not, you can work with custom and third-party controls too. We still can automate those. But I want to show you some of those bonus features. And here at this grid level, at the Kendo Angular grid level under quick steps, you can see that you can quickly add in verifications, like in my case, verifying the data item count is 10, or that the selective item count is 2, or that the grid is set up to be groupable or not groupable. Like, these are settings that are exposed through these translators that I can add now into my test and verify very quickly. I'll add that verification into the test there. And as you can see, I went from executing a test into recording very easily, very smoothly. And if we go back, I did have, it looks like it did fail for me there on one step, but I want to show you, let's take a look at this update button step. We can even just right click and do run selected step. In fact, actually, let me do a run from here, since I might have inadvertently caused it to finish on that. So you can see it targeting that update button, you know, using that element highlighter. It's a very, very unique identification that we're using there. And if we go jump into this, in fact, if we look at this update button from the element logic, and here on the bottom left, these are all the elements that Test Studio is storing. So far we've seen sort of the surface level of a test where you have a lot of flexibility to change the way elements are interacting, or sorry, the test steps are interacting with the application. We can even rerun that again, for example, on the fly. And you can edit and you can record and you can work back and forth. But I'm going to take you a little bit further behind the scenes after this goes back to the browser for a second. I'm going to take you a little bit further behind the scenes to show you exactly how this element is being identified. And as you can see, click the button, no problem. Back over here, we have the passing step. And if I go in and right click and edit this element, we're going to go another level deeper into Test Studio here and show you that it can locate an element. And actually right now it's complaining, saying, hey, I can't find it, because in fact right now the status of my UI is not in an update option. So I'm going to pause my recorder. I'm going to hit that edit button to bring update back. And now I'm going to come back and I'm going to click validate expression. And now you'll see that it runs this query of filters against the DOM and it locates that element. Not only does it give me a yes, we found your element, but it also, if you could see the UI, it highlights it on the UI at the same time. So really, really powerful, gives you that visual feedback. But this shows you a more complex type of find logic strategy that, again, doesn't necessarily depend on a path, but rather can go find a row based off of a unique Kendo row identifier, this class. Now for the generic ones out there, it might be a TR, it might be a role called row. There are other ways of identifying it, but for our Kendo controls, we do get the K- classes that help us find things. And that gives you that leg up, that edge on making sure you can automate our controls. And then you can see it's looking for that particular row by its inner text, and then it's looking for that button by the label on the button, essentially. So this is a good example of a hierarchical, or what we call a parent-child chain defined expression. And below you see suggestions. So I have the ability to, with this UI, update and edit my elements. I could even right-click and replace elements from the DOM itself. As just a lot of flexibility to maintain your elements codelessly. So I think we answered the challenge there of making sure we have a verification that identifies that the data loads on the grid prior to interacting with it. And secondarily, when we interact with these complex controls, how much we can actually do in identifying the elements, even in a very complex situation.
Yep.
What do you think of that, Peter?
Yep, absolutely. Thank you for that. I'm pretty sure the challenges are accepted and addressed. And you, by the way, managed to fast forward a few slides from our beautiful slide deck here with the presentation, showing them the bunch of the features like elements reuse and the ease of maintenance and the translators. I just wanted to very quickly show a few and say a few words about the so-called translators that that we have here in Test Studio. You guys saw the Angular application, but those special extensions, actually this is what the translators are. We're the same vendor for the Telerik UI and for Test Studio, so you're taking full advantage of that thanks to those extensions that open up the element and giving you some more advanced scenarios to automate, again, with just a few clicks. And they're available, as I said, for our desktop suite and also all the web suites as well. Right, like this Blazor example, which you can see on your screens at the moment. But since we're towards the end of the webinar, and by the way, for everyone, after up until the hour, we are going to stay a few more minutes in order to address and answer all of your questions. So stay with us if you have the time. But now I would really like to quickly interact with you one more time, last time, I promise, and ask you this second poll question. And it is open at the moment. Who is involved in testing within your organization? Very interesting answers, by the way.
Pretty tight race. Oh, we see.
Both UI developers. That's interesting. Yeah. Well, I guess we'll have a clear winner anytime soon.
It was close there for a while.
Yep. Between the developers only and the QAs and developers, but the clear winner here is both QAs and developers. You should be able to see the results on your screens as well, and we really thank you for that.
I'm happy to see that only 2% are letting your end users test. Obviously, for internal applications, sometimes that's something you can get away with, but I don't know too many companies that let their end users test their externally facing applications.
It's quite not only scary, but quite risky, you know, depending on the case, of course. By the way, whoever answered that, we would be really interested if you can share more details with us throughout the questioning panel to see how exactly this works for you guys. Until a while, actually, we are wrapping up this webinar and share a few words about this magical term called agile. And are we agile? Are we fragile? Are we gonna do something about that? Very quickly, if you ask me personally, you cannot be really agile if you're not reactive and quick enough. Yeah. And how you can achieve that, one of the ways to achieve that, of course, is to cut the maintenance time as much as possible. We were talking about legacy and legacy code and technical debt and whatever, but the more you can reuse your environments, the more you can reuse the changes in your elements, and the more you can distribute your tests across different environments and browsers and whatnot, the better. And you will be able to follow your sprints or iterations or whatever is called, trying to be agile. And you know, the other magical word that comes into my mind here is DevOps. Right? We all just want to sit down and press this magical button, and pipeline triggers, and the build is done, and then the automation tests execute, and we just wait for the report. But for this to happen, you need to have the whole ecosystem set up and running, and all of the integrations to be possible, or as we all call it here, that everybody has a seat on the Agile DevOps table. One tool at a time would not solve you that, and one tool at a time will not bring you close to be agile. Right? You need to have the tool and tools integrated well enough that would create the right testing strategy for everyone on the table, whether it's QA, whether it's devs, whether it's both, as you said in the answers, whether these are your managers that want to see the results, DevOps guys, etc., etc., etc. All right, so a slide showing you a bunch of the integrations that we support out of the box. Long story short, every popular solution for CI/CD that exists out there could be easily integrated with Test Studio, and which is very well documented. By the way, I encourage you to double check and check this one. But now, question. Yeah, sorry, let me go ahead.
Just on that slide, I saw a quick question that someone asked about a particular, I don't recall which one. There's a lot of questions, and thank you for all the questions. Keep them coming. But it was a particular build tool. And really what it comes down to is if you can make a command line call as a step, as part of your build or your pipeline, then yes, you can actually access Test Studio as part of that process as well.
Yep, absolutely. And there is this is a very good topic for a dedicated webinar that we should do about it, by the way, DevOps and Test Studio. So let's have this in mind. What I wanted to concentrate now is allocating some time to answer the questions for the guys, and we can answer them vocally here. But before we get to there, I promised you at the very beginning that we have a special cutscene after the credits. So let's see if we can play it right now while all of us answer your questions, guys.
Hey everyone, I'm Andy Whelan, a senior sales engineer for Telerik Test Studio. And you know, a lot of people ask me, How do you prepare for a Test Studio webinar? Well, I just automate. And automating. And automating. And automate. And automate. And automate.
And automate.
And automate.
And automate.
It's that simple with Test Studio. It's time to let automation work for you.
I see, Andy, that you managed to automate your world pretty well, and your wife in particular. So congrats about that.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you automate, you'll have time for all those things, right? You can sleep. You can have your automation running while you sleep. You can have it working for you. It's brilliant when you get there. So we'll help you get there. Don't worry.
Absolutely. Yeah. Cool. All right, guys. Let's see what kind of interesting questions and outstanding ones we have out there, so we can address them while our colleagues are answering directly. I see one recent. What type of reports are output or configurable after a test scenario is put together and executed?
If you don't
it's a very
mind,
good. Yeah.
I think I have a screen I can pull up.
Perfect.
You can go ahead
Amazing.
and speak to that if you wish.
Yeah, so this is the Test Studio Executive Dashboard. Just very quickly, guys, we have inbuilt within the tool itself a reporting solution that allows you to create charts, reports, and see what's happening. However, I personally prefer working with the Executive Dashboard here, which is accessed via browser. And if you notice, there is absolutely no login required, meaning that ideally, in your case, you can share this link as long as you host it correctly. It resides on port 8085 by default, if I'm not mistaken. So you can share those beautiful results with anyone within or outside of your organization. And it shows you all of the test lists, their runs, the last 10 runs of the test list, and those beautiful green and red colors are the statuses of the last 10 runs that are available there per project. The dashboard is dynamic. Yeah.
This is a great tool. We're seeing this is being brought into the retrospective calls. This is being brought into daily stand-ups. In some cases, we have customers that have this on a TV screen all day long, so they can always see the health of their applications.
Yeah, absolutely. It's based on real life problems. As we said, it's dynamic. It refreshes automatically, by the way, and it's also loved by the managers because you can not only see the results, but you can create custom report definitions based on what's available here, you know, on the fancy charts and graphs that the managers love. You can generate them from here, share them, or export them into PDFs and have them enjoy it. You know the drill.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Very popular feature. Definitely part of Test Studio Ultimate that gives you access and makes it relevant, right? At the end of the day, results are really what are most important from testing. And we always say there's the catch-22, the QA catch-22. All the time you put into testing something, and if it comes back past, it's almost as if that time was wasted, right? We're looking for bugs, so if we don't find them, it's almost like, well, that's great, it works, but I need to find the next bug, right? Automation really turns that around and allows you to focus on failure rather than starting from the beginning every time.
Yep. That's it. Thanks for that, Andy. Let's see if there is something else that is unanswered or remains.
I did have a question. I saw one pop up about uploads. So like file uploads and downloads. I guess since I've got my screen up here, we can look at that. Test Studio does automatically record in your interactions with uploads and download dialog handlers, as well as any other dialog handler you run into during the recording process. So there's a natural recording capability of that. We also do put them in the step builder. So if you wanted to, you know, have a save file or an upload file or something like that, you could see that you can add that in manually, but in addition, and most often, you probably just record it. I'm showing you the WPF side of things. On the web side, there's even more options when it comes to the dialogues. As you can see, alert, confirm, log on, file upload, download, prompt, generic. Yeah, even generic ones you can customize completely.
Yep.
And you can data drive those. I almost forgot to mention, sorry.
Yeah, we had a bunch of questions about data driving and reusing variables here, which I see that are answered by our colleagues, and I thank them for that. Which reminds me that I read a few questions of people sharing their actual scenarios and their actual cases, which is amazing, guys. Something that is not a sales pitch. This is the way it is, and Telerik as a company is very proud of our support, right? And I really encourage you to do that and verify it for yourselves by addressing those kind of specific real-life cases or projects to our support channel, so that we can very quickly address them, and you will see eventually why we're so proud of our support. Right. What we also have, when using Test Studio within a pipeline, would it be possible to export test results in a JUnit format? We answered this, but let's share this with the customers. The Test Studio command line runner that we are using can output the results in JUnit format. This is well documented, and you can double check it for more details.
Yeah, just bringing up some of our documentation here. This is putting Test Studio into place in an Azure pipeline. And I believe this is returning a JUnit format. As you can see, it's a parameter there within the command line call where that is going to put the result data and in what format as well. So this is even going into a publishing test results step that might be part of your pipeline too. And as you can see, again, the reference to JUnit there.
Yep. Absolutely. Oh, this is something interesting, Andy. It seems like a challenge. How we find the dynamic element using the element recorder. What would you say about that?
Well, I mean, finding a dynamic element, like I showed in my Angular grid test with that upload button find logic, you know, there's a lot of ability that Test Studio does automatically, right? So, you know, just opening a random element here, you know, in this particular case, it chose to use text content and tag name as that combination to find an element. When we get into a more complex scenario like the grid I was showing earlier, we might use a row, we might use let's see, actually, let me get back to my test here real quick. And we'll, yeah, in this case of the edit button, or the update button in that example. Let's see if I go back up to, or scroll to top, this one, I believe, this edit button here. Similarly, you can see this chained find expression in this app using an ID, find the row that contains the Intertech Chef's Anton's Gumbo mix and locate the edit button on that particular row, right? You can even data drive this and make this a really, really powerful loop. So this find logic is not necessarily out of the box. This is something that I customized, but I can customize it very, very quickly. I can data drive it very quickly. And up at the top level of the project lives our find logic strategy settings, where you can actually tell it what to look for. Now you'll see that my strategy currently has name, ID, text content up here close to the top of the list. If I'm running into an application with dynamic IDs, I'll deprioritize this. I'll be looking for something else. You know, when Angular came out, we didn't have to retool Test Studio. We already had this ability, so we just added new identifiers like ng data, ng model, you know, ARIA label. And if we're using an Angular application, we might be prioritizing these higher on the list. So it's customizable for the application you're working with. You can set that find logic, and like Peter said before, we back that up with element images. So you have both this find logic and the element image that goes with it as well. So here's the edit button image that goes with that element find logic. If it can't locate it with the find logic, this will automatically kick in and try to locate it with the image. And that will result in a warning. Your test will pass with a warning, and it'll let you know, hey, you may want to go fix your find logic, but we went ahead and continued your test because we found it with the image. So really, really powerful combination. This also means tests fail less because it can continue even though something in the logic may have changed. And ID changes, oh well, that's fine. We could probably still find it and interact with it.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Andy. And I don't see any other new questions, by the way, popping up, and we managed to address all of them within the chat. Guys, we're looking forward to your feedback, questions, comments, concerns, whatever, and we'll be in touch for sure. I guess it's time to wrap up this session. Up until the next time we meet. So from my end, thank you for your time today, and hope that we'll talk together soon.
As well, me. Thank you so much.
Have a nice remaining of your day and night, and goodbye.